Dr. Alexander-Theodotu, you are representing the island of Cyprus in a suit coming up in the European Court of Justice. Can you tell us why you are doing this?
Yes. I am from Cyprus myself. I have a residence in Cyprus too, and I have been involved with Cyprus in all aspects of life for a long time. With the present situation, it was foreseen about 2 years ago that there was something wrong with the economy. And that started since Cyprus entered the European Union. The introduction of euro led to the increase in prices, the shortage of jobs. We had unemployment beginning rising. We have a bad trade, export, etc., of various agricultural goods, etc. And it was obvious to me from that time that the benefit of the euro was really not as good as people thought at that time. So I kept a close eye on the situation, and I helped also quite a large number of families who found themselves impoverished because of the introduction into euro. And these families were lower working class families and also a large number of pensioners. Gradually, the economy worsened. We have reached the situation that the Laiki Bank, the Marfin Laiki Bank, was seriously into debt, and the European Commission encouraged the government to fund it to survive by 3 billion euro. And following that, the Laiki Bank did not recover, so the European Commission encouraged the Laiki and the Cyprus Bank to buy the Greek bonds, which in any case belong to the German government, and they spent billions of pounds buying the Greek bonds, which had no value, and that brought the collapse of the banks, the collapse of the economy. I have a lot of clients who've been having their deposits in the Laiki Bank, and all my clients, especially the ones who are in England, they lost enormous sums of money. The Laiki Bank in London closed immediately without really giving information to the clients as to the whereabouts of their money. I have another group of clients consisting of nearly 48 English clients who had deposits and loans with the Laiki Bank. They were not told until 1 week ago that their money has been transferred to the Bank of Cyprus, and they do not know whether their loans or the money have any value or any consequence now. So, and the situation is a complete chaos. Under the circumstances, a lot of the people that I knew, and they knew me as a professional person, as a lawyer, asked me whether it would be possible to take the action to the European Court of Justice. At the same time, another lawyer in Cyprus, Mr. Pascalidis, has produced a large number of clients, of 3,000, and made an application to the Supreme Court of Nicosia for taking some action against the rules of Troika relating to the economic help. That Supreme Court rejected their application as such and sent them to go to the district courts instead. And that is no good because the district court is an inferior court and it's going to cause a great deal of delay and getting nowhere. On the other hand, if you study the situation of the Supreme Court was wrong in rejecting their applications. Following that fiasco, the people wanted to hear about European Court of Justice. I held a meeting in London with Professor Tridimas and another barrister, Mr. Alexander Milner, from the office of Sir Francis Jacobs. Now, Professor Tridimas and Sir Francis Jacobs, they were both working at the European Court for cases, Greek cases coming from Athens against the Troika. So they knew the situation quite well. And the advice of these high specialist lawyers was that we must take a direct application to the European Court of Justice because the time limits as such for the imposition of the rules in Cyprus of the Troika was very important. We publicized that in areas, leaflets and newspapers, and you had a great number of people seeking help to go to the European Court of Justice. And it is a sign of resistance, I could say, of the majority of the people against these really inhumane rules that the Troika is bringing on Cyprus.
Well, it would be very good for people outside of Cyprus in all of Europe to know what has been the effect of the measures imposed by the Troika in Cyprus. What is the living condition right now?
The living conditions are very bad. We have the following situation. The people who are very wealthy, and that is a minority, can't survive on the savings they have. But the majority of at least 75% of the population, they live by day. The unemployment has tremendously increased. Any job opportunity open has got over 1,000 candidates, and young people are forced to leave the country, to come here, to go to the Arabic countries, to go everywhere to seek an employment. It disorganized the families completely. The pensions have been eliminated, and that's a very bad thing, because over 35% of our population consists of people over a certain age, pensionable age. The national health in Cyprus is suffering because they're getting money from that. And we had today a sort of information that the cooperative bank, where a lot of the country people were putting their money, they're now coming under the cuts by Troika. And there was a voting yesterday at the House of Representatives, and they just passed the legislation, just passed it by a few votes. So that shows that the government is not doing enough to resist the Troika. The previous government signed the agreement. The present government is following what the previous government did. They have never had an application to the people, like, for example, a referendum to see whether the people would like their money to be taken. It's a theft, in fact, to be taken away by a bunch of people from Europe and to destroy themselves, the place, etc.
So you are saying that, the propaganda in Germany and elsewhere was, these are just Russian speculators who got expropriated. So you are saying it's not that it's really the population.
It's the poor people who pay the price. It's the poor people, because what the Germans were trying to say is that these are depositors, investors that came from abroad, particularly Russians, and they put their billions there, and therefore these are the people. It's the ordinary people, because all these very wealthy people have got their money in offshore companies, they knew that the economy in the country was not going well. Somebody who's got a very big company, for example, a Russian who is a billionaire or multimillionaire, knows exactly what is going on and would not keep his money in the Laiki Bank or the Bank of Cyprus or the Cooperative Bank. So it's very stupid, and it is an utter lie to say that it is the tycoons and those people, the opportunists, who are losing them. It's the ordinary Cypriot who's losing their money. It's the ordinary Cypriot. They're destroying their families.
Well,
it's probably important to add that for ordinary people, although it's up to 100,000 euros that's being protected, the credit controls mean that you're limited to withdrawing up to about 300 euros a day.
Yes.
And most businesses are now only accepting cash rather than bank cards or checks. And while this is supposed to be a temporary measure, the same measures were introduced in Iceland during their crash, and they're still in place 5 years on.
Yeah.
Given the fact that Mr. Dijsselbloem, the new head of the Eurogroup, after the imposition of these measures on Cyprus, said that this would be the template for every other country. In the meantime, the same has been applied or is being applied to Detroit. So therefore, given the fact that the EU Commission is trying to put the final touches to get the bail-in law implemented in all of Europe, and it already exists in the form of Dodd-Frank in the United States. What is your advice to other people because there's no public discussion about this at all?
There is no, and the government, in fact, I could speak from Cyprus and also Greece in a way, there hasn't been public discussion encouraged. All the people in Europe should resist these measures, should resist a small team of people to dictate, to become the dictators, to ruin the European people's life, to ruin their culture, to ruin their families, because that's what we're talking about. They should resist. The governments, if they are democratic, they should ask the people to vote for these measures. If Cyprus, for example, where the Cyprus people were allowed to vote, these Troika measures would be thrown out. They wouldn't be there. And the same in Greece. And we want to leave Europe. We want to go back to our economy as it was before, because they got us into Europe in order to use us. That is the whole issue. They got us into Europe in order to take advantage of smaller nations like Cyprus, Greece, etc. The situation in Spain, I was speaking to some Spanish people yesterday, the situation in Spain is getting worse day by day. For example, the unemployment is reaching 56%, and yet the Troika there is still continuing the cuts, and the people, the majority of the people, haven't got any money. No money whatsoever. And it would lead also to the division of the Spanish country, because now the various cantons, they want to separate themselves, to have their independent governments. There is a great deal of discussion in their local assemblies. It would lead to this disintegration of the Spanish nation. This is what is happening.
So basically, you are saying that the line that this euro would unify Europe, guarantee peace forever, in reality it doesn't look like that, because I have not seen so much tension between the different nations since 1945.
That is right. There is a great deal of tension between the various countries. And I'll tell you another thing. Just in about half an hour, I'm expecting a group of Croatians to come to our office who want to come out of Europe. They want, because Croatia got into Europe on the 26th of June this year, and already they know what is happening, and they are taking their measures. They want to come out. Also, countries like Poland and the others, that they are forced to enter Europe, they are resisting very strongly and very fanatically. They don't want to get into Europe because they're going to be destroyed and used like us. They want to use Cyprus as an example to the European Union, a small island which has got a political problem, a small island which was very prosperous and living well before these people were involved. They have deprived us of our money, they are depriving us of our freedom, because if you can't speak and the government cannot speak, the elected government cannot speak, then you have no freedom. They are buying us over. They use 10 billion to buy over the Cypriot people, in the same way that during the Turkish rule, the Turks, as you know, sold the Cypriots to the British for £75. Now we are sold for 10 billion to go over to the Troika. This is not freedom. If people want to have their freedom, they should all get up and speak and resist. We're speaking today about the imperial dictatorship of the European Union. We're not speaking about the freedom of the peoples. There's no rule there that joins the people together, and they destroy, in addition, they destroy the cultures of the people, because they want everybody to be the same. Everybody should follow this and that, and none of the rules inside there really benefits.
There is even an acknowledgement about a so-called democracy deficiency in the European Union, but I would say that given the fact that neither the Lisbon Treaty, at least in Germany, was not discussed at all in the public, there was not one article ahead of the vote, and the same thing, there is absolutely no knowledge about the coming bail-in law. People just don't know. There is no discussion in the media, so I would like you to comment on this.
Yes. There is no discussion in the media. It's like what they have done now, I know, for the example of Cyprus. I would speak of Cyprus. They threaten the government. If you bring it to the foreground, if there is a discussion whatsoever, suppress everything. Otherwise, you don't get the 10 billion. And the found some people who would listen to them. Because, as far as I'm concerned, the present president and the other president, the ex-president, they are both wrong. Discussion in the media is a must in a democracy. The first time that anything was mentioned, believe me, and this is correct, and Mr. Skinner here would say that, the first time that it was mentioned that people should resist and get up and do something, it was the articles that we put in the Greek newspapers ourselves. Nothing else. And we had a lot of telephone calls from people who say, please do something about it. That is why we're having this rally in Nicosia on the 17th of October, because someone should speak. Everybody's been suppressed there. And I believe the decision of the Supreme Court, because they do have the power to go, must have been some kind of higher operation to keep their mouth shut.
But, I mean, in a certain sense, this is really, when in the Depression of the 30s, Chancellor Brüning imposed brutal austerity, and then came Hjalmar Schacht and obviously Hitler. One would think that people have learned something, that if you have a depression and a world financial crisis, if you impose that kind of brutal austerity, that is fascism.
You're very right, because what we have is a different kind of Hitler here. Because a lot of people, especially the older people, who die because of the lack of heating and because of not being able to get the right medicines, and I know it's a fact they're not given the right medicines. Some of the people who haven't got accommodation because the old people's homes are closing down. I do not know where they're going to go, probably live under tents in the field. The young families who've got no money and no money now to buy any of their properties because the banks are not giving them any money, are they going to be homeless? And I already seen people in the Engomi districts of Nicosia, I must inform you, the people in the Engomi district of Nicosia, they are fed through the charity of the church. The priests collect money going around, buys food, and they go around to receive their daily meal. And what are they eating? A bowl of soup, some potatoes, and if they're lucky, once a week some meat. And they are long queues.
It's not just the church. There was a Cyprus Aid concert where people could go along to listen to the music and give foodstuffs instead of paying to go in, and then have that distributed to the ordinary people.
Yeah.
So it's getting quite desperate.
If this happens, means the country is being demolished by the Troika. The only other time that I saw this happening was during the Turkish invasion, when everything was completely destroyed. People were living under tents, and everybody living abroad, had to go and take clothes and everything. We are doing exactly the same now. So what is the benefit of us being in Europe and in Europe? Where is the protection of Europe? Instead, they're sending a bunch of dictators down in Cyprus to kill the country, because the country is finished. There is no freedom. If there is no freedom, then you have no country. So the Cypriot people should get up and resist. They should make the application to the European Court, to the Court of Human Rights, and they demand from the government to leave the Troika, because we have passed in Cyprus, it's got a very long history. We've been through a lot of disasters. We are a small nation, we've been occupied many times, but we came out alive. This time, the danger is far greater than the invasion from Turkey or the invasion from the Assyrian Empire or anything. It's far greater because they brainwash people as well, and they force the government to say the opposite of what the truth is. So the government is issuing bulletins saying that we should accept these measures, these austerity as they call measures, because at the end they're going to be benefited and the economy would go back to square one.
The other day, President Anastasiades was called before a commission of inquiry where he said the gun was held to his head over these policies. There's even democratic deficiency of the people not being consulted, but also you have the next level of the people's representatives being given no choice, effectively held hostage over the economic situation.
I think the socialist former presidential candidate Alegre from Portugal recently said that Europe has become a concentration camp where those people who are not yet affected should not be complacent because it's just a question of time when it would reach them. What would you tell the Germans and the Americans, as an advice?
Well, the advice is to respect the freedoms of the people, because over the history, the most valuable item in the life of an individual is the freedom of democracy, which you don't have, and not to allow a small group of people from the International Monetary Fund, the Central Bank, and from a Deutschmark in order to rule our lives. And this is what is happening. My advice is, if you are really trying to help the people of Europe, both the Germans and the Americans, they should vote new and healthy laws. What you are trying to introduce now in America, the Glass-Steagall situation, to protect the interests of the people. If they don't do that, and if they don't have healthy laws, then forget it. We're going to disaster. So we're trying to resist as much as we can by educating people that they should get up and fight about this dictatorship, against this dictatorship. And that's what we're trying to do in Nicosia. And luckily we've got the Croatians following us as well.
You mentioned about sort of what it is to other countries, and whether they should be prepared for the same thing to happen to them. You mentioned specifically Dodd-Frank and Detroit. Well, Switzerland is a major banking country, and even they've looked at introducing it, and they're not part of the European Union. And as a country, they feel under the pressure to do so, even though they're not directly under the Troika's influence.
Yes, because
denn wenn der Rest Europas zerstört wird, werden sie ebenfalls die gleiche Behandlung erfahren.
I mean, in the case of Detroit, where the Cyprus template is also being, implemented. As a matter of fact, today is a hearing conducted by Congressman Conyers in Detroit, which will be very interesting to see, because there is also a lot of resistance in Detroit. But there, the pensioners were expropriated by 95% of their pensions.
That's what is going to happen in Cyprus, because I was speaking to a representative of the Pensioners Club, Mr. Fanos, here in London, and he was telling me that the pensioners are almost deprived 99% of their money. So they would have to go back to live on the money, if there is any money, to be given by the immediate relatives or the children, if there is any money for the children. And especially those who live in the countryside, these are the people who are going to suffer the most.
Well, I mean, I think that these Troika measures have a life-shortening effect. The only question is it conscious or is it just incompetence?
No, I think they don't care. I think they're very callous people, because if they really care about the humanity, they would not introduce these measures. They would not introduce to impose their will over the countries. They should allow the people to consider their situation. It's not just competence, they are callous. They don't care. I see the way they come in Cyprus and the way they went to Greece. They present themselves as being some kind of Olympian gods. They are not affected by the suffering or the feeling of the people as such. So I think they're very callous. They are not interested in the interests of the humanity. They're only interested in the bureaucracy to establish a domineering empire over the rest of the peoples of Europe and to rule through it. That's what they're interested. And the freedom of the people is thrown all the way away after so many years of struggle. I'm afraid I don't have the time for them. I am against totally, and a lot of people who follow us are against it. And the more we speak, and the more we join hands with all the people in Europe, the better it would be to resist it all together. I believe that in 14 European countries, there is a great deal of disenchantment with that. And we're going to discuss it this evening with various representatives, because we have to establish a slogan, and you have to campaign jointly and together, supporting each other, because the turn of Cyprus is now, the turn of some other country will be tomorrow, so one after the other will be slaves. What is the difference between a Roman slave nation and a slave nation under the empire of Europe? I can't see much difference, because money was essence. If you didn't have any money in ancient Rome, you're a slave. So today, the nation, let's say, hasn't got money. We're slaves to Europe. They don't allow us even to vote in our home parliament. They don't allow the people to decide. They want to decide for ourselves. That is slavery. We are slaves. And we want to liberate ourselves.
I just want to end with an optimistic note that Friedrich Schiller, the German poet of freedom, in the writing about the fall of the Netherlands from the Habsburg from Spain, he said that if people unite for a good cause and have a good plan, then they can even put down the arm of the most brutal despot. So in that spirit, let's make sure that this bail-in law gets defeated. Do you want to have a final comment to our readers and listeners?
All the empires come and go, and this empire would collapse, as Schiller says, because of the unity and the resistance of the people. It's going to be end. You agree with me?
I agree completely, and in fact the British politician Edmund Burke said the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice evening.